Welcome to the vMOX Road to Mobile Victory podcast. Enterprise mobility is bigger and more complicated than ever. In this series, we'll talk about the latest trends, inspiring success stories, and simple and effective tips for managing your corporate mobile assets, expenses, and services.
Hello, everyone. I'm your host, Andrea Leiby, Director of Marketing at vMOX. In today's episode, we're going to talk about forward and reverse logistics and enterprise mobility and talk about some of those biggest mistakes that businesses can make when it comes to end-to-end management. Joining me today is Mike Saxby, vMOX Vice President of Sales. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Andrea. Appreciate you having me today.
Great. So according to Deloitte's Connectivity and Mobile Trends 2021 survey, the average household has 25 connected devices, nearly double from 2019. So fun question, so our listeners can get to know you. Do you collect anything interesting, maybe besides the devices in your household?
Yeah, because I was going to answer. I would guess there's probably 50 plus connected devices in our household. I feel like we might even have 20 Alexas around here somewhere listening to everything. You know, currently right now, I'm not in the phase of my life where I'm collecting a lot. But back in the day, I used to collect a lot of things and still have them. So I still have a pretty mean collection of Garbage Pail Kids, if you remember those from back in the day. But I clearly might be dating myself with that reference.
That's okay. I'm sure some people can relate. So, what do you think some of the changes have been over the years when it comes to mobile devices and, employee habits?
Yeah, there's been quite a few changes. I think first and foremost, mobile devices have become a plain and simple a requirement, right? I mean, they're so entrenched in our life, both personally and professionally. I really don't know anybody these days on the professional side that literally could not do their job if they didn't have a mobile device. So they're connected to us all the time. We're on them all the time. And they're integrated into all aspects of our life, including the corporate aspect. One of the other big changes, and I believe a lot of this has been, led by Apple and then others have followed, is that devices have just become so much more powerful. I mean, there is so much more that you can do on a device. I mean, these newest groups of devices are equally as powerful as many of the laptops that are out there. And not only are they powerful, but the, what I would call application marketplace has really developed alongside of it. And so many organizations now have applications that they're using to run their business, and these applications are now native in iOS and Android. And whether it's platforms like Slack or Salesforce or Team or HubSpot or any of these others, you have these powerful devices with native applications. It's not a surprise that we have become so reliant on them. And in doing so, because of that, I think as we're seeing employees have more devices that at their disposal and more, what would be portable or mobile devices. So we're seeing more employees with tablets, as a for example. In a lot of enterprise organizations, we're seeing them shift away from traditional laptops and providing specific or certain employees in certain jobs and roles a tablet instead of a laptop, because those tablets are, again, equally as powerful and have those native applications that they're using for running the business. So those are some of the changes that we're seeing because of that, because of the rise of these, more powerful devices. Device cost has gone up. Just kind of looking back, and I think we all forget about it, the original iPhone cost around $600. The newest iPhones, because I recently just bought one, the Pro Max version of it. I mean, out the door, this thing was close to $1,600. So
wow.
There are so many different now makes and models of devices, and devices, because they're more powerful and can do more and have greater application, have also become more expensive. So kind of no surprise. And I also think from a support perspective, and this I think is pretty logical and makes sense, right? As you have a device that is more powerful, it can run more applications, it can do more, there's greater support that has to be provided to that employee that's using that device. When it used to be that you had a cellular phone and the main purpose of that cellular phone was to make phone calls, and you could barely manage your way through, the old school sort of text keyboards, the support level was very different than, what is needed today. And then I think last that I'd add, just in terms of, Andrea, sort of what we're seeing is that employees expect to have a device, and they expect to have their personal experience with a device to be the same as their professional experience. Yeah. And I think in many cases, because in their personal life, that same app marketplace that we've talked about, they're running their lives off of apps that they're downloading from app stores that are native to them. The employees themselves are sort of demanding and wanting that expectation of having that same experience when they're at work. So just some of the things that, some of the changes that we've seen.
Yeah, I think we certainly, our expectations have changed. That's for sure. What do you think, what are some of those mistakes that enterprises or businesses have made when it comes to managing their mobile inventory?
Well, based on everything that we just sort of talked about, I would say probably one of the biggest ones was treating a mobile device as sort of dispensable, right? I mean, couple years ago, you sent an employee a mobile device, and, when they left the company or it was time to upgrade to a device, the asset just didn't matter anymore. They were just purely dispensable, sort of we just don't care. It's just a mobile phone. We're seeing a major shift in that for a variety of different reasons. One of the biggest is, and probably no surprise, is the semiconductor shortage and the availability of devices. So not only have these devices become more expensive, as we just talked about, but because of things like the shortage in semiconductors, they are now used devices are more valuable now than ever before. No different than what we see in things like used car prices. It's exactly the same. Also, as they're becoming more powerful and there's more applications and people are using them in a lot of cases to do their primary work, they should have been, I would say, all along, treated no differently than a laptop or a PC, and being treated as a dispensable device, they weren't. And so we are now starting to see organizations go, that was a mistake. This $1,600 high compute device that, yes, is still a cellular phone and can make a phone call, is an enterprise grade device that employees are using to run the business. We have to treat this no different than we treat giving an employee a laptop. So I think that was one of the sort of biggest mistakes, but we're also seeing a dramatic shift. The other thing that we're hearing from a lot of customers in terms of mistakes, and we've seen a lot of this through the sort of that initial push of work from home and then the hybrid work, was not, I'd say, fully realizing the importance of data security and data privacy, and maybe not considering all the steps and processes that had to happen to ensure that devices were properly cleaned, wiped, collected, etc. So we are getting outreach, Andrea, constant and consistently from organizations coming to us and going, hey, just as for example, a large retail company, we just had this audit. And in the audit, we had not thought about it and had found out that when an employee was leaving the company, they were just giving their device, that corporate device, back to their manager, and their manager in many cases was just giving it to the next new employee that would come in. And although they were doing things like having containers on the device and sort of wiping corporate data, they hadn't thought about things like the personal data and how the employee, how the employee might use that corporate device and store personal and confidential data on it. So employees might be going into Apple Notes and putting in PINs and passwords and credit card information. And all of a sudden, that corporation realized that unknowingly, they were transferring personal and confidential information between individuals. And so I think that was one of the biggest mistakes that we've seen, is that not realizing that importance around data security and data privacy. But the good news is that I think there's been a lot of visibility and transparency, and we're seeing companies they're working quickly to adapt to sort of these changes and rectify and remediate these.
So what are some of those examples of kind of businesses or stories that you've heard of companies that are kind of doing it right, or righting the ship, so to speak? Where are they focusing?
Right now we're seeing a lot of companies, what I would call audit processes, right? And so, again, not to sound repetitive, but I think if you follow the logic, it makes a lot of sense. Hey, overnight, all of our employees are going and they're working from home. Just call it a shock to the system, right?
Yeah.
Buy as much equipment as you can, ship it to people's homes, and guess what? We have to do it. We have to keep the business running. And let's be honest, organizations were very successful at that. So, hey, it worked. That's the good news. Now, as we come back in, companies are now starting to go, okay, I think we have a good plan of what our normal and steady state might look like for the next 2 to 5 years. How do we start to look at all of our processes? How do we audit those? How to create standardization? How do we ensure? I mean, for many of the large organizations, those large small businesses to enterprise organizations, they have all sorts of certifications, right? That their business has to abide by certain guidelines to maintain those certifications. I mean, Andrea, in our business, we have a ISO certification.
Yeah.
And so we have to constantly and continually audit and look at our processes and go, did we make a change in a process when people went to this type of new work environment that fundamentally changed what we were doing and maybe created some exposure? And so I would say right now, if I was any organization, that's what I would be looking at. As part of that audit process, especially as it relates to mobile devices, I would really dig into the onboarding and offboarding of new employees and how they support that with their mobile device. I think it's crucial to have those processes well-defined, documented, and really create a system around it, so there's consistency in that process. And then on top of that, the ongoing visibility of those assets, right? One of the, I think, biggest things or biggest challenges that we see is that a lot of organizations might go, hey, we've got 5,000-ish mobile devices out in the field, but we're not exactly sure who has all of them, right? And we're not exactly sure even what type of inventory there is out there. So it's also really hard in some cases to define and manage against a process when you sort of have that initial lack of visibility. So a lot of the work that we're seeing and a lot of the demand and questions that we're getting, at least initially right now, are helping and assisting organizations to get proper visibility into all of these mobile devices that they have, ensuring that they know the type of device, where the device is located, who the device is associated with, what division or group, or what we would call sort of maybe even cost center. So those are a lot of the things. And then because of the semiconductor shortage, which we believe trend will, at least in the next year, be ongoing, building processes around the collection and reuse of those devices, right? We're seeing a lot of companies that come to us and are like, one of our biggest challenges is we have a new employee that's joining the company, and we go to order them a device and they can't get it for 2 weeks, but they need it to work. So what do we do?
Yeah.
And, so really making sure that they've used internal processes to what I would call shore up their own internal supply chain when the external supply chain is no longer reliable.
Yeah, and I also say, different from maybe a couch, you can't necessarily live or work 6 months without it. So I think it's a different story there.
Absolutely, 100%.
So, with the surge in new devices entering the workplace every day, challenges like employee turnover and supply chain and those security threats, I can imagine device management is going to be overwhelming for teams. So I appreciate you sharing your perspective. I think it's really insightful. I look forward to continuing the conversation and talking about support for another area of the life cycle. Hopefully we're going to talk about end user service or help desk. That's certainly seen, its fair share of evolution over the years. So I look forward to that. Thank you for joining me today.
Appreciate the time, Andrea. Always a pleasure talking.
Great. Thank you.
From all of us here at vMOX, thank you for listening. Remember, mobile victory can be yours. Just trust in the experts. We'll see you next time on the road to mobile victory. To learn more, visit us at vmox.com or follow us on LinkedIn.